Welcome to church. We're glad y'all are here. I'm going to get right into this thing. Matthew chapter 7. Verse 13 says this. It says, you can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. In the King James Version, the last part of that is worded this way. It says, straight is the gate, narrow is the way, which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. I got to be honest with you, this is a verse that has always confused me just a little bit. And I think the confusing part for me lies in the part where it says the gateway to life is very narrow and the road is difficult. I don't know when you got saved and you were doing everything you could to avoid hell. I don't know that we all really counted the cost and took into consideration what it's saying right here, which is that the road is difficult. Okay, the destination is life, but the road to get there is very difficult. And it says it's narrow. And that's the part that I always found strange. I always was just like, God, why would you make that road narrow? Why wouldn't you widen that thing out so that it could hold more people and that there would be a lot more invitation to come if that road is wide? So I want to look at some words in that statement. The gateway to life is very narrow and the road is difficult. First of all, the word gate, some translations say gate, some say gateway. Either way, it's a Greek word that's pronounced poule, and it means this, gate. So that one's easy. We're past that one. Let's move on to the next one that kind of piqued my interest. The gateway to life. Life. In the Greek, this should be a word that is very familiar to us this year. Zoe. Zoe. It should be familiar to us. Why? It's a reference to the God kind of life that is available to every believer. It's a full, blessed life that is completely devoted to the Lord. The full and the blessed life part of it are contingent upon you being devoted to the Lord. All right? You're saved, and you will eventually get a Zoe life when your body dies. But unless you decide to devote your life to the Lord, in which case you can have that full and blessed life right now. So life, that one's pretty easy, but the one that really threw me just a little bit is narrow. And it's a Greek word, and it's pronounced phlebo, T-H-L-E-E. I don't know who flee, that's a hard thing to say for me, but phlebo in the Greek means this. It means to press in, as in grapes, to press hard upon, or a compressed way. And I dug into that, I read that, and there was no more clarification for me than there was to begin with. Narrow means pressed. And so I just started really diving in and trying to get an understanding of that word. And what I did was I found that word used in another verse that I think will also be familiar to you. It is 2 Corinthians 4:8, and it says this, we are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. So we are pressed on every side by troubles. Pressed in this particular verse is also the word phlebo. So when it says the gateway to life is very narrow, narrow there means pressed. The gateway to life is pressed. We are pressed on every side by troubles. That word in those two scriptures really carries all the same meaning. And so in 7:14, what Jesus is saying is not that he has intentionally made a path narrow for us, so for the purpose of it being difficult to traverse. That is not what has happened here. But rather, the road is narrow because the things of this world are always pressing in on us and on that believer that's trying to walk that road that leads to life. You can know this: you're going to be pressed. You're going to be pushed in on. It doesn't imply gentle pressure. It is a hard pressure. It is an intentional type of pressure that is being applied to you, and that is a very difficult time. I mean, I'm not trying to prophesy that over us. I'm telling you that's what the word says. It's difficult to traverse that type of road. So we are hard pressed on every side. We are traveling a narrow road where we are constantly being pressed. Can anybody testify that you've been hard pressed on every side by troubles at some point in your life? I can relate to that statement. We are living in a world that is adversarial to the Christian life. The cultural landscape is so far removed from what God intended at creation. Is it not? We live in a world that, I don't know exactly what the statistics would be, but I would say that a large number, if not, especially in America and in the Western world, a majority of people, even some who claim to be Christians, really, their religion is humanism. Right. Yep. Humanism elevates humans above everything else. They don't believe in God, or they believe in religion just as something that you should enjoy, but isn't necessarily going to lead you anywhere, because they don't believe in life beyond what's right here. So humanists don't believe in a creator or God. They reject religion for the most part. And that is the belief system that rules the day in modern America. Humanists believe themselves to be the measure of all things. They think this is all there is, no life after you die. They believe that the source for their power to solve problems is within them. They believe that truth comes from within them. And they don't have the Holy Spirit in them. So it's literally just them. They believe in truth coming from them. They use human rationale and logic as their approach to life. And they believe that our moral values are founded on our human nature and our experience. So when you use their logic, truth becomes relative and very fluid. And we're not just talking. I mean, there was a time when some of what they said you could at least find a logic in it, but now they apply that to math and science. Things that were supposed to be provable things, now they apply that to math and science. And so it's a world where anything goes. My truth can be different than your truth. My morals can be different from your morals. But your morals, my morals, are higher than your morals, but you believe yours are higher than mine. There is no standard. And that's why we live in a world where people can't define what a man or a woman is. People value the lives of animals over the lives of humans. They value their relationships with their animals over relationships with human beings. They believe there are more than two genders. They believe that men can have babies. You live in a world where lots and lots of people believe that men can have babies. Think that through. They believe that a baby in the womb is simply a body part of the woman carrying it, and she can do whatever she wants to with it. They believe that every problem can be traced back in some form or fashion to racism. And they unapologetically celebrate excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures. In other words, they feed their flesh at all times. The flesh rules. And it's not easy to be a believer in Jesus Christ when there is evil at every turn and it is celebrated and encouraged. But here's what I want you all to hear. It has never been easy. We think this time is the worst because we're the ones in it. But we've never been boiled in hot oil. We've never been hung upside down on a cross. You all still have your heads attached. Don't think for one moment that it hasn't always been hard. It's always been hard. It's never been easy. Every generation of believers has their own brand of evil that they have to learn, to overcome, and to deal with, and they're surrounded by it. And Matthew 7:14 was talking to people who were dealing with those kinds of things. And that's why it's painting a picture when it says the gateway to life is narrow and the road is difficult. It's painting a picture of what it looks like to follow Jesus. Why? Because we are told that it's silly to build a house without counting the cost of building that house. It's the same thing with becoming, it's ridiculous to become a Christian without actually counting the cost. What does it mean to be a Christian? There's what it is. The road is narrow and it's hard. But here's the good news. The destination is life. Zoe life, the God kind of life. That's the destination. That's where we're headed together. But you're going to be pressed on. You're going to be pushed. You're going to be prodded by people, poked. You're going to be persecuted by people. But you shouldn't be surprised by that. This verse, narrow, means you're going to be pressed upon. You're going to be compressed. You're going to be walking along the path, and you're going to feel that pressure. But here's the way that this is the Melanie version. This is Melanie's, not translation, but whatever the other word is that you can use. You could interpret it like this. Walking the path to the God kind of life is narrow because you're facing the constant pressure of the culture, the seduction of sin, and the temptation of the enemy, which makes the road very difficult to walk at times. That's a lot different than straight is the gate, narrow is the way that leadeth unto life. Both are true, but one paints a much more vivid picture of what's really true. The Amplified says it like this. It says, the gate is narrow, contracted by pressure, and the way is straightened and compressed that leads a way to life, and few are those who find it. We're living in a world where everybody's looking for easy and comfortable. You know, I would love to know what the percentages of people who are inventing things these days, what percentage of those things are just things that are intended to make life easier for us? I'd say most of it. But I'm not talking just, okay, it was easier when a hay baler was invented. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about, making beautiful round bales that, I'm talking about really going above and beyond to make things more comfortable for us. I'm talking about, when I was a kid, my curling iron didn't get nearly as hot as the curling irons that are made these days. It was a lot of work to use a curling iron back then. Now, what have they done? They've worked really hard to make it easier and more comfortable for me. And in 2 seconds' time, my hair heats up to 450 degrees. And it takes a lot less time to do your hair than it did 35 years ago. We live in a world where easy and comfortable is what everybody's looking for, but that's not what you signed up for. We signed up for a faith journey that when we are really truly aiming at the goal of the God kind of life, the Zoe life, it says that we are going to be pressed on every side. Now, in the Greek, the word for every means every, all. You think that through. What does that mean? It means there is no easy route in your faith. The only Christians out there that have it easy right now are the ones who aren't aiming for the Zoe kind of life. I mean, you think that through. There's very little opposition from the devil for a Christian who's having zero impact, whose life is not a testimony to the goodness of God. There's no opposition to that person. There's no resistance by the devil. Why? Because you're doing nothing for the kingdom of God. The enemy of your soul exists, and he's real, but he's honed in on those who are making an impact. He actually still thinks he can stop what God is doing on the earth. So when the enemy of your soul sees that you have your eyes fixed on fullness of life, when you want the best of what God has for you, he chooses you, and you get in the crosshairs, and he does everything he can. He presses on you from every side. From every side. What does it mean to be pressed on from every side? It means there's not a single side, not a single part of your life that there isn't pressure. They may not all be at one time, but sometimes it is. And sometimes just having a great deal of pressure in one area just affects all of the other parts. So what's it look like to have pressure on you in every part of your life? You feel it in your relationships. You feel it in your marriage. You think, you know what? It would be so much easier to just call this thing off. There's so many more reasons to divorce than there are to stay married. That's what it feels like when you're feeling pressure in your marriage. It feels like, you know what? That guy at work gives me a whole lot more attention and a lot more affection than my husband does. It looks like, you know what? My wife's put on 40 pounds and that's not what I signed up for. That's what the pressure looks like. It's pressure in the relationship with your children. You're trying to be a good parent, but you keep failing at every turn. Kids are getting on your last nerve. You're trying not to let them get on your last nerve, but they are. You indulge your children too much, and then you have to deal with the consequences of indulging your children too much. Or you baby your children so much that they're not independent as adults when they should be. It affects those relationships. You feel it. You feel that pressure in your relationships. You feel that pressure when you're a kid dealing with your parents. You got parents that are demanding respect and they haven't earned it even a little bit. You've got parents who are trying to walk out their faith, but they're so consumed with themselves that they've forgotten that you're even there. Or maybe you're an adult kid trying to deal with aging parents. And they need you. They need you a lot, but you're working a full-time job. You're not ready to retire and take care of them full-time. That's pressure that we feel as parents. In-laws. Need I say more? Pressure. You're part of a blended family. I can't think of any other any other family structure that could cause more pressure than just trying to marry several different families and trying to make things work and keep peace. That's a lot of pressure. Those are just family relationships. That's not even counting your friendships, your relationships with coworkers. You feel that pressure in your relationships. You feel the pressure in your health. Diet and exercise, what's that? You know you should be doing it. You want to be doing it. You're looking at a calendar and a clock and you're trying to figure out where that fits in. You just got a diagnosis. You feel that pressure. You self-diagnose regularly. That's pressure. You're putting it on yourself, but it's pressure. Sometimes it just amounts to exhaustion or headaches or vision problems or bad knees or a bad back or a heart problem, your gut, whatever it happens to be, but there's pressure on us because we have to deal with health issues all the time. Maybe it's that you're being asked to do something at work regarding your health that you're not okay with. The whole country had to deal with that recently. And as Pastor says, you know, there's a very, very good chance that we will deal with that again in the future. We should expect to deal with that type of thing again in the future. That's pressure. When someone is saying, if you don't take this thing, which I'm not going to say, then you're going to lose your job, that's pressure. And some of you all had to deal with that. Some of you are just trying to not have the whole world look down on you because you don't know if you should trust modern medicine or a homeopathic doctor, a functional medicine doctor. You don't know if you should just be oiling up all the time. You don't know if you can take over-the-counter medication. Should you take all these vitamins? And I mean, that's pressure. I literally watch what I say about anything I might be doing health-wise based on who I'm around in the moment. Because I know the ones that are going to pressure me regarding what I'm doing concerning my health. A lot of pressure there. You feel pressure in your job. The expectations are too high. The deadlines are looming. You feel it in school because you're not getting everything done that you need to get done. Maybe you're being taught something that doesn't line up with what you know to be true in the Word of God at your school. Maybe you're not being noticed on the job. That's a lot of pressure. You feel it in your pocketbook. Why? Because our money isn't going very far these days. You know, I laugh every time they want to talk about 17% inflation or 22% inflation. I am so sorry. I'm paying 2 or 3 times as much for a lot of the things that we used to buy on a regular basis. Your paycheck isn't going like the way that you want it to. And then on top of that, your transmission goes out in your car, or you need a new set of tires, or whatever it happens to be. A deer jumps out in front of you. Somebody owes you money and they don't pay you. That's a real thing. And sometimes those people want to pay you, but they don't have it either. That's a lot of pressure. Your insurance just went up again. You're being asked to tip everyone. Don't even get me started on that one. They want the tip before they've provided the service. They want the tip even though they're making $15 an hour. It's crazy. But if you're lucky enough to not go someplace where they ask you to tip someone, then they're asking you if you want to donate your change. I mean, these charities are making billions of dollars. CEOs are making millions of dollars in most cases, because very little of it gets to the people that it's intended to be for. Pastor and I were talking about this yesterday. The government is using your money to fund things that you don't agree with. I'm just telling you, there's pressure when it comes to your pocketbook. There's pressure when it comes to your mental health. You're trying to have a good attitude. You're trying to have a good attitude. You wake up, okay, today, God, I am going to have a good attitude. And then you go in Casey's and they say, would you like to donate your change? And you're just like, ah! That's right. Woo! But I mean, you're trying to maintain good mental health. You're trying not to be discouraged. You're trying not to be disappointed. You watch the commercials that tell you about the latest medication for all the different forms of depression and that sort of thing. I'm not saying medication for that is bad. Some people need that. I'm happy that it's available to them. But now they make medications to help the medications. I'm just losing my ability to even understand it at all. And if it's not that, then someone's trying to recommend their therapist to you. You thought you were good, and then someone's recommending a therapist to you, and you're like, or a yoga class, or a meditation app, or whatever it happens to be, but it's everywhere all the time. And lastly, you feel it in your faith walk. You know what the word says. You're trying to stay in faith. You're struggling to believe. You're trying to stay in church, even though you might feel like an outsider every time you're here. You want to read the Bible, but you don't understand it when you read it. Or every time you sit down to read it, something happens and you don't get to read it. You got friends and family that tell you don't have to go to church to be a Christian. You feel closer to God when you're sitting in a tree stand, or you're out on the water, or for me, you're at the mall. I feel real close to God when I find a great sale on a clearance rack that, yes. I'm just telling y'all, there's pressure, and it's in every part of your life, every single part of your life. We are pressed on every side by troubles. But here's the good news. We are not crushed. Some versions say we are not distressed. You got to be encouraged by that. The pressure doesn't have to crush us or cause us distress. And here's why. The last part of the verse says this. It says, we are perplexed, but not driven to despair. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to be honest with you about what it means when it says we are perplexed. But you got to hold on so I can then explain what it means, but not driven to despair. The word perplexed means this. I wrote this in here, but the word perplexed actually perplexed me. So the original Greek word is a word, I think it's aporeo. And it means this: we're to be without resources, to be left wanting, to be embarrassed, to be in doubt, and to not know which way to turn. And so it's saying, we are perplexed. We are without resources. We are left wanting. We are embarrassed. We are in doubt, and we don't know which way to turn. That's actually what it's saying there. Woohoo! And that doesn't sound very good. But immediately after that, it says we're not driven to despair. And I want to explain that a little bit more closely. The word despair here is another form of that Greek word aporeo. It's exaporeo, and it means utterly at a loss, utterly destitute of resources, and completely without hope. When you are pressed on, when you are compressed from every direction in life, there's an attack on your state of mind, and you will feel like you have no help. You will feel like you have no resources. You will feel like you don't have the things you need. You will feel doubtful about the path that you're on, and you will feel like you don't have hope. And some of those things may even be true in the natural. You might look around and you might not see any resources. You might look around for that godly friend of yours to encourage and lift you up, and you start walking toward them at the end of service just because you desperately need them, and they just wave from afar and keep going. It will feel that way. But the word tells us that we are not driven to despair. We have to learn to capture those thoughts that are causing us to feel certain ways and stand on the truth, which is that we will never, ever, ever be utterly without resources. We will never, ever be utterly in despair. We will never, ever be without any hope. Us feeling that way doesn't mean it's true. And sometimes we've just got to say, you know what? It looks true. It feels true. But praise God, it is not true. I have a God who said he would never leave me. He would never forsake me. And I just want you to know that is what we hold on to. And if you jump down to verse 17 in 2 Corinthians 4, it goes on to say this. It says, our present troubles are small, and they won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them all and will last forever. The world is not going to tell you that there's anything waiting for you beyond the grave. And that's just when we're getting started. That's just when it gets good, y'all. That's when it gets good. But even here on the earth, just because you're going through something, just because you're hard pressed on every side, you are not without hope. You are not without resources. So, that same verse in the Amplified, I want to read it to you from the Amplified because I like the way it says it. It says, our light momentary affliction, this slight distress of the passing hour, is ever more and more abundantly preparing and producing and achieving for us an everlasting weight of glory beyond all measure, excessively surpassing all comparisons and all calculations, a vast and transcendent glory and blessedness never to cease. Since we consider and look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are visible are temporal, brief and fleeting, but the things that are invisible are deathless and everlasting. We have hope. We are pressed, but we are not crushed.